upon further review. There were terrible calls. Do we want to go ahead and jump in?
After further review.
After further review.
After further review.
All right, Tom, where would you like to have us start?
I'm going to start with the Oregon game. Went back and rewatched a little bit of it. Like, we talked about it a bit on Saturday. Like, they were missing guys on their offensive line, and that was very evident. But, like, I looked just watching the game, there were a few shots down the field, but do you know what Dylan Gabriel's average air yards per attempt were in that game? 4.2. Like, my primary concern was that in a game in which Oregon really didn't look like they were trying to do a whole hell of a lot and put it on tape. Like, yeah, the offensive line was not at top level, but he took 3 sacks against Idaho. Bo Nix was sacked 6 times all of last year. And Dylan Gabriel, for his size, I don't want him taking sacks because we know he's not the biggest guy. We know he's had an injury history. So that is something of a concern for me going through the season. But based on what I saw in that game, I'm not overly concerned about Oregon going forward. That just felt like they were approaching that like a scrimmage, and it stuck. They let the other team hang around a little too long. So upon rewatch, the alarm bells aren't all that great. And then just another fun stat here before I let you guys get to some stuff, because I also
I want to stay here with
Okay.
Oregon for a minute too.
Go.
Okay. The reason why it was so alarming is because of what had happened in the FCS game in each of the first 2 years under Dan Lanning, that they put up like 70 and 81, you know? And so that's why you've got the sticker shock, as I like to say, when you're like looking through the scores to get into it. You start to see that they were able to move the ball a lot. They just struggled a little bit in terms of actually getting points there. But I think it's fair to consider that Oregon is a little bit more of a work in progress, because that's one thing that stood out to me in terms of reviewing everything together, is that there were teams where it looked like they had been playing college football for 2 to 3 weeks, and there were teams where it looked like you were still in week 2 of fall camp. And that happens every single season, but it does look like Oregon, I believe Oregon will get much better as the season goes on. I think that's, you have to like slide your scale. Like, okay, they are not to top speed yet. They are working there. Other teams, a Penn State, a Georgia, they look like they are 2 to 3 weeks into the season. And so, it'll all even out by the time we get middle October, late October. You sort of will be who you are based on your talent and availability. But Oregon is not quite humming there. The good news for the Ducks is, when do they actually need to have that motor going full speed?
It's context dependent. If Oregon's schedule was not so backloaded, you would feel differently, I think. We talked about this on the reaction show. Do I think Oregon has a better ceiling than Penn State? I do. If they lined up and played today, given who we think is out for Oregon, I would take Penn State to beat them, right? Because they're playing a guy who I'm pretty sure is a walk-on at center.
I saw that note.
And he plays like a walk-on. So if they played a real D-line right now, they would get 8-0, I think. Also, I think Dylan Gabriel has a worse arm than Bo Nix, right? He's good at throwing that rainbow ball down the field and to let guys.
And only to his left. Only to his left. Don't ask him to throw right.
There is a bit of a tendency there. And he's pretty accurate on the underneath stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think this will still be a really good offense. You're also kind of waiting for a bigger body guy to emerge. Oregon wants that to be Jerion Dickey, I believe, at receiver, because Tez and Evan Stewart are not really big guys. And so I'm kind of curious, do they have a bigger, body guy? They went out in the portal and they got Evan Stewart, who I think is a great get for them, obviously. But there was just not a plentiful amount of the bigger bodied receivers in the portal this year. Georgia got the only one that I really like, actually, in Colby Young. So they may just be kind of speed, but they need that power run game to come back a little better, which if they get the O-lineman back, I think they possibly will. If they don't, then they won't. Defense, though, pretty okay.
Yeah.
20 carries, 49 for Idaho is pretty solid. And I watched that Boise game against Georgia Southern. They put up insane numbers. Madsen also threw like 3 of the most WTF throws I saw all weekend. Like, I'm not talking about like bad throws, but I'm talking about like clearly bad decisions into double coverage. Murphy for Duke also had one. I was like, oh my God. But like clean pocket, just what are you doing, dude? So we'll if they have to lean on him more, I'm curious as if they can. Like if Oregon can shut down Ginty this weekend.